let's click that, and let's just get on with this. I realise the tech flub I made. It's fine. I realise the problem. I realise what I did. We've moved. There we go. Let's do that. I realise the problem because I set all the bits and pieces to go live, and it caught itself on. It made its connection, but I'd failed to press the last button. Let's get that sorted out. There's a bit all over the shop. There we are. I hadn't pressed the last button to actually kick the stream into proper live mode. So that's on me. That's the wrong button, Anthony. Well done. I think we are. Actually, that's the one place I need to go do that. Quickly post this link. Tell people we're live, because I'm a Wally Bozo and didn't press the right button. Where's it gone? Where's it gone? There we are. I want to do that. Just posting the link out in a few places. Do that. There we go. I don't think. Evening, folks. Evening. Yep, I scuffed the button. I scuffed it, Nikki. I normally send it live so people can hang out before the thing starts, and I didn't press the right button, and so I forgot to press one of the buttons, and so it was just sat there doing nothing. So we're going to do a U. We're going to let people come in first, and then we'll get cracking on in a minute because it appears people are starting to filter in. Owen Sobchuk as your club's best ever mid-season signing. Well, given your team's not that old, I think that's probably fair. Folks starting to filter in, which is what we want, which is cool. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Technically, because I'm trying to think who would be the Bison's best ever mid-season signing. That's a real tough one. So I don't think you can count Victor Kabenko because Kabenko played for a season, went away, and then came back. So I don't think he counts. Best mid-season signing. Being on times for amateurs. Best mid-season signing from a Bison perspective. Brett Larson. Brett Larson was a really good mid-season signing for the Bison. Who else? Who else was a good mid-season signing? I'll tell you who was a good mid-season signing. His second time around was Kieran Long, or when we signed like Kieran Long and Matt Tawalski. Rene Yarlin got to be up there as well. Rene Yarlin got to be up there for good mid-season signings. In terms of bits and pieces. Andy Holly for MK, yeah, that's a fair shout. Was Nicky, you'll remember this, or somebody might remember this. Sonny Carlson at Hull. Was Sonny Carlson a mid-season signing for the Pirates? I have a feeling he didn't start the year and came in part of the way through. Did Sonny Carlson? Because like I say, there's a few mad ones going on this off season. Right. If you're watching on catch up, if you're watching on catch up, the secret word to stick down in the comments as you're leaving your bits and pieces is luggage, and then just like I say, tell us as well who your favourite the best mid-season signing for your club has been. So yeah, luggage, and then who the best off-season signing for your team. Sorry, the best mid-season signing for your team has been. Like I say, we're just quickly checking a few bits before we get rocking and rolling. There we go. That's fine. Magic off. I think we might be all right to get going momentarily. Now, the useful bit is I've done is we've of course had to slightly adjust what we do tonight just because of one of the things we usually do isn't available, but we will work it out as we go. Guys, get on the gender fluid and all beyond the binary. It is Wednesday night, it is 8 PM, and welcome back once again to the BOTW What's Current stream. My name is Anthony Russell, here to take you through absolutely anything and everything from the weird, wonderful and wacky world that is British hockey. We cover everything, every senior division, every single game. We look at the lot. No stone gets left unturned. From Belfast to Bradford, Leeds to Lee Valley, we look at the lot of it across the next 60 to 90 minutes worth of chatting about British hockey and everything that we fancy once that bit is done. Hope you're all doing well on a Wednesday night. Like I said, my own stupid fault. I forgot to press the last button that everybody needed for everything to go live, so that one's on me. I will blame the fact I've had a bit of a thick head this afternoon, but otherwise we're doing all right. We're doing okay. A lot of news to talk about. We will talk about all the play movements that have happened in the last couple of days. We'll look at we'll actually have a proper look at the Elite League table because, of course, things are starting to the wheels are really starting to turn now. We'll look at the National, where the Bison are slowly turning into a wagon at the bottom end of the table, and Swindon are starting to really show their title credentials, as Milton Keynes and their fans seem to still have something of a bit of a crisis. In the rest of the NIHL, Edinburgh continue to be a wagon. Solihull continue to be a wagon. The Sheffield Titans continuing their good run as well, and one of the longest winning streaks in British hockey finally came to an end last weekend, as well as checking out all the big and important news from the WNIHL, including that massive bottom of the table clash between Streatham and Bristol. Either way, bit of housekeeping before we really kick off and start chatting about bits and pieces. So if you know what we're about to say, hum along, as you already know the words, but mostly if you're new, bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, the number one website for all things British hockey. Follow me on my journey this year within the box thinking, some unique insights from the commentary position high above the Guildford spectrum as I commentate on the Elite League this year for the Guildford Flames. Of course, Sunday's game, another overtime loss, another loss for the Flames against the Sheffield Steelers, but an absolutely cracking game of hockey again between these two sides. Bar that 5-1 walloping that Guildford got mid-injury crisis, these two sides have pulled out a few bangers already this year. And Sunday was an absolutely cracking game. End-to-end stuff, intensity, physicality. You saw the best and some of the flaws in both of these teams. Cracking game. Like I say, you can go and get some my bits and pieces. That's over on bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. And of course, alongside In the Box Thinking, you've got Hockey Stories, our long-form, in-depth sort of content series. Some are written, some are audio visual. Of course, we've talked to Jordan Kelsall not too long ago, and a new Hockey Story is coming in the next couple of weeks. The interview was done last night, and it is going to be a written piece this next time. Spoke to a couple of people whose hockey journeys are very intertwined, where they've literally been together. They both had to step away from hockey for moments before stepping back in. Friends, rivals, all kinds of bits and pieces. It's going to be a cracking piece when I eventually get the chance to put it together. So that'll be there as well, but plenty of stuff as we edge an inch ever closer to our 15th anniversary next March. But all of that to check out, match reports of old, tons and tons of interviews and game write-ups and things to look at over on bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. Down in the description below, as you're watching here on YouTube, is all the fun bits and pieces, the links to all of our socials there on the link tree. We're on X, we're on Facebook, we're on Blue Sky, and there's the link, of course, down there to our virtual busking hat over at buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. Never going behind a paywall, just not our style here, but it does cost money to do things. So if you want to help keep the lights on, keep the wheels turning, you can chuck us a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. And of course, all your usual YouTube spiel. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like the video, share bits and pieces out, because we are, as all bits and pieces that kind of cover British hockey, we're fighting the algorithm ever so slightly, and especially me, because strangely enough, talking about Solent Junior Devils versus Bristol Pitbulls 2 doesn't do the algorithm numbers apparently. So keep sharing the bits and pieces out, always massively appreciated. And of course, the great bit is every Wednesday night, providing I'm not commentating elsewhere, but it's usually a Wednesday night at 8 PM. We come here to talk about all things British hockey, and of course, it's not just me talking at you. You guys get to join in as well with the chat. Questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, anything you guys want to chuck in there as we talk about British hockey, you by all means do so. But if you are going to use the chat, please do remember the golden rule here at BOTW. The rule number one, DBAD. Don't be a dick. Be respectful of other people's thoughts and feelings, and we will all have a jolly good time. And of course, keep throwing in your thoughts about the warm-up question, your team's best ever mid-season signing. Vanya Antonov last year for Swindon, but that's only because I've been watching him play, watching him to join us since his base in those days. Plus, he's my first owner loan. Well, that's pretty awesome to see. So good to see that. Or Hergy return. Does he count as the best mid-season signing when he came back mid-season like 50 times? Also, bonus points because you put the umlauts on Herg. It's not Hoog, it's Herg. I like people who can spell. Patrick Forsberg was not bad mid-season. So that's a fair point. He's actually pretty good. Lightning have had some good success with signing Finns mid-season. Marta Järvente was another good signing. Plus Jani Jokela. Yeah, I'm trying to think of any other sort of a few other sort of MK mid-season signings like that. Jokela's was a good shout though. Forsberg, like I say, was outstanding for you last year. So definitely no big arguments on that one. Anyway, no games tonight for us to cover. The last couple of Wednesday nights, of course, either I've been commentating or we've had games to talk about. So we don't need to do any of those bits and pieces now. However, there has been a fair old bit of news, and we will start with the most recent bit of news, which comes out of the Elite League, and that is the fact that Fife have moved and made another signing, but also lost somebody in the process. Brody Kay, of course, very much a boy of the kingdom. Originally left Fife in the summer to go down to Cardiff, played a few games down there, came back to Fife, and is now left again. He is now headed over to the BCHL. The BCHL, of course, what was under the Hockey Canada banner as a development league, stepped away from Hockey Canada to be independent in the last year or so, and Brady Kay has signed for the Spruce Grove Saints in the BCHL, the same team that Manchester Storm's Connor Lee is playing for now. Connor has been playing very much a depth role at Spruce Grove. He has 3 assists in 10 games this year. Really fascinated to see how Brody Kay will fit into that structure. There are ways to watch the BCHL online. The big issue, of course, is that they are literally the western side of Canada, because that BC stands for British Columbia. So if you're awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, knock yourself out trying to watch some of those games. Maybe just use catch up on that one. But either way, the BCHL, a good solid league, not the highest level of junior hockey that you can play in Canada by any stretch of the imagination. However, traditionally the BCHL has been a method for and a pathway less towards major junior hockey but more towards university hockey. Now, how that will work is a little bit up in the air, particularly with the change of rules, of course, which meant because previously players who played in major junior, and by major junior I mean the Western Hockey League, the Ontario Hockey League, and the Quebec and Maritimes Junior Hockey League, what used to be called the Quebec Major Junior League. So a lot of the places where lots of your favourite NHLers played before they played in the NHL, they'll have played in the Western League, they'll have played in the Ontario Hockey League, they'll have played in the QMJHL. And the BCHL kind of sat on a lower tier, and it's traditionally a path through into universities, whether it was into U Sports or CIS as it was known before it changed its name, or into the NCAA. But now, with the opportunity for major junior players to play in university leagues in America, particularly the NCAA, means that the BCHL's role is a little bit up in the air right now. However, it's still going to be a really, really solid level of hockey for Brody Kay to play at. And given the fact he's still a young man, still within age to play in the BCHL, a great opportunity for him. Yes, admittedly, playing alongside men, playing senior hockey back home, a great opportunity for him as well. Being a Fife boy, getting to represent Fife, huge opportunity. However, development-wise, he could really, really make some inroads and come back a much better player from playing in the BCHL. We wish him all the best at Spruce Grove. And where a young man has gone out the door, they have signed a new player who instantly becomes the oldest player in the league. David Booth is heading to Kirkcaldy. If you're not familiar with David Booth has had 30 goal seasons in the NHL, 500 NHL games, and since finished up in the NHL the better part of a decade ago, and has basically been the wandering hockey troubadour ever since then. He has played absolutely anywhere and everywhere. He will turn 41 years old in about a fortnight's time. Before the end of November, he will be 41. He is older than Marcus Ericsson of the Belfast Giants. Booth, last season here in the Northern Hemisphere, didn't play tons of games, but did rock up towards the back end of last season, playing for Ferencváros in Hungary. Now, they play in the Erste Liga that's based mostly out of Romania. It's the league that Matt Myers is now coaching in. And after the Northern Hemisphere season finished, there was a bit of a gap and there was a lot of talk as to what he might do, but eventually he did end up in one of my other favourite leagues in the world. He signed on for the Melbourne Ice of the Australian Ice Hockey League. And to say David Booth hit Australia like the proverbial weather system would be a massive understatement. Booth scored 64 points in 14 games as the Ice charged their way back to the Goodall Cup, their first Goodall Cup since 2017. And also, ridiculously, at 40 years old, David Booth's first championship as a pro hockey player came this past summer in Australia, which is pretty bonkers. The great stat, and I will just quickly dig it out because John Bullard, the Nottingham Panthers commentator, pointed this out, because of course it's not the only NHLer that they've had recently added to the roster. Just to get this up from Jono. With the signings of Simon Dupré and David Booth, the Fife Flyers now have 727 regular season and playoff games of NHL experience at the club. The only other two current Elite League players with NHL experience are Sami Aitakalio, the netminder for the Glasgow Clan. He has 2 games, and Chase Pearson at Nottingham Panthers has 3. And now Fife, who, let's face it, are not the best team in the league. Not the best team in the league. What is it? 16 games lost on the spin. Have now added over 700 games worth of NHL experience in the last fortnight. Now, it's guys who haven't played in the NHL for some time, and that is an issue in and of itself. However, you don't play in the NHL without having the hockey brain. And one of the things that we saw, one of the things at least I saw in the summer, is that maybe the legs are not as fast as they once were, but Booth's hockey IQ was there, and he instantly made everybody around him better. Fascinated to see how Jamie Russell uses him at Fife. Fascinated to see what impact he can actually have on the ice, because the hope will probably be that he's going to play some big minutes for the Flyers. Really interested to see what happens and what he's able to do. And of course, the other big issue, will he stay? Because we know things in Fife at the moment have not been brilliant. We know there's been a bit of turnover. We know that people are starting to get a little bit antsy because of results. But Max Babrea said that they would get out the checkbook for people who made sense, to get people who would come there. And while David Booth has put himself into the Elite League, I can't think off the top of my head how many. Let's quickly pull up his Elite Prospects page, which I did have open, so let's quickly get that open here. So David Booth, as a professional, we won't worry about youth leagues and bits and pieces like that, but he did play for Michigan State in the NCAA. So let's work this through. National Hockey League, American Hockey League, KHL, Norway, DEL2, Erste Liga, AIHL, EIHL. Makes it this is his 8th senior league. But you just look at the ridiculousness of it. Like 30 and he's 30 goal season in the NHL. So the 2008-2009 NHL season, 31 goals, 29 points, 29 assists, 60 points in 72 games for the Florida Panthers. Multiple seasons. Played for the Panthers, played for the Canucks, played for the Maple Leafs into the bargain before, and played for the Detroit Red Wings for half a season before his NHL time came to an end. Like, irrespective of his age, this is a huge thing for Fife to be able to get a player of that kind of quality into the lineup. Fascinated to hear what you all think about that one. As we drop down, of course, some news in the last couple of days out of the National League in terms of some player movements, and one today that was a little bit more controversial than what we saw recently. But the news out of Solway that family circumstances mean that Derek Osick has left Dumfries. Obviously, he'd had a pretty decent start. Was obviously very, very popular. Yet a change in family circumstances was the news out of the Sharks. But an almost instant announcement of a replacement in the form of Jonathan Yancis, former Kitchener Ranger, played for a couple of years with the Queen's University Gales. They are based out of Kingston in Ontario. He's had time at a couple of ECHL clubs as well, like RUFF. He looks like he will be another very, very solid addition. Of course, I don't know whether you're still there. Nikki. But Johnny Yansis played with Arbajakai in Major Junior. So of course, if you like, of course, you may have some fun stories about one of the NHL's more recent, interesting fighters, as it were. Hope they don't expect him to sleep in the car park, Mike. Naughty, naughty. Shouldn't laugh. Did. But yes, either way, that should be a fun one, and he will make his debut this coming Saturday as Solway heads to play Milton Keynes. The other bit of news today, and one that has caused slightly more controversy, confusion, of course, comes out of the Steel Dogs because for whatever reason they've signed an import netminder. Brady Parker, who has spent the last 4 years playing at Clarkson University. So Clarkson University playing the ECAC, so one of the Eastern Conferences of the NCAA, played with Jack Chacon, played with Matthew Gosselin, who both play in Guildford. So pulling in an import netminder, of course, a talking point in the National Division, given the fact that a fair few teams, more and more, have pulled in import netminders. But for me, this feels like a bit of a confusing one for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't think the Steel Dogs were doing badly. Like, they won 8 on the spin before losing to Basingstoke on Saturday night. Alex Oldell does not have world-beating numbers right now, but he's just a shade under a 90 save percentage, and they were winning. And the game that they lost to end their winning streak had Curtis Warburton in there, who was playing his first game of the season. I don't understand necessarily, and this isn't a slight on Brady Parker himself, because I'm sure as a dedicated, he's gone through the rigmarole of being at university and playing his way through juniors. But Brady Parker has played 15 games in the last 4 years, and they're bringing him in to do what exactly for the Dogs? That's what I don't get here. Now, the press release talks about the fact that it's about helping Alex Oldell develop. Well, call me a skeptic on this one, but the better way to develop Alex Oldell is to let him play hockey. Maybe. The other big issue as well, the thing that I did not like, and the thing that I would definitely criticise, for, is was actually made aware of that. I was aware of the first part of that, Nikki, not the second part, but I'll talk to you about that later. Certainly like I said, the confusing bit about this is the fact that what is this really doing? But also as well, Dan Crowe, released by the Steel Dogs inside a paragraph that doesn't even make the bottom of the piece to get by itself. It's shuffled in amongst the news that they've signed an import netminder, which is not the way I think is appropriate to release a player that's played for you for 2 years. Like, if you're making changes, fine, right? We can all accept that hockey is a cutthroat, dog-eat-dog world, right? It is not a pleasant place sometimes. Sometimes as well, guys can be the good player in the wrong place at the wrong time. It just doesn't fit, right? Nick Seitz at Sheffield. Nick Seitz didn't magically become a bad player overnight. He scored 30 goals last year. But sometimes it just doesn't work. Or sometimes you think you need to make a change to kind of bolster things and move on. Okay, those things happen. Hockey can sometimes be a harsh and a cruel place. But you can also do something for the fact that if a guy's been there for 2 years, give him his own PR. Don't bury him. Not, like I say, not even at the bottom of the piece, in the middle of the piece, as it were. And I'm sure, as will generally happen with a lot of places, clubs will rectify themselves to the decisions that they've made. Their prerogative. And hopefully, Dan Crowe lands on his feet. Like, because he's not a terrible netminder. He's a young guy with a ton of potential. You think about maybe does he fall to a place like Leeds to go back up there and allow the guys in the allow the guys in the Div 1 team to just be in the Div 1 team? How do they work that out? Either way, there's definitely a place for him to land, and I'm sure he will be okay. The confusion here comes because it sparks off a couple of bits and pieces. In terms of what happens. So now the Dogs have got 5 imports, which immediately lights the thing on. It lights the alarm bell in your head. Who's going to go? But it also comes with the other caveat, because we've seen the Steelers come down to the Steel Dogs and take an import. Sam Tremblay has been playing brilliantly for the Steelers so far this season. Is one of the guys that's currently there about to head up and about to play for the Steelers instead. Because you're not going to go through the rigmarole of signing an import netminder for him to just sit there and look pretty, nor will he have bothered traipsing his way across 5 time zones to not play. So that remains to be seen. What happens in terms of Alex Oldale? Do we have a 1A 1B split? Is Alex Oldale now the backup? What's happening here? And I think that's the thing, of course. Those are the things that we can all speculate on and will start to play out in the next little while. But like I say, for me, I don't get this. On a practical level, this to me feels like you have kneecapped a young British starting netminder, and I'm not quite sure what for. If they had gone and gotten a starting NCAA netminder, it still wouldn't be great, but you would maybe kind of see it more if they were turning around and say, actually, you know what, we're going to make a real big run at every trophy now, and we are going to go out and we're going to play big hands in short term to get those trophies. And rather than having Alex doing 9 out of 10, he's going to do 5. He's going to do 4 or 5 out of 10 instead, and we're going to let the import run the gauntlet at the end. Like I say, for whatever reason, Brady Parker has not played a lot of hockey the last couple of years. Like I said, he has played 15 games in the last 4 years. Yes, in NCAA Division 1. That's a higher level of hockey than the National Division, and I get that. But he's not played. He has not played a great amount of hockey. And I think that is the thing that confuses me on this one. If I quickly should have his bits. If I can quickly click a few buttons, do that there. Because Parker's his actual pedigree is pretty solid. AJHL, so not the highest level of major junior hockey, but in Alberta, but a decent level. But in the last 4 years with Clarkson University, 2021-22, 1 game. 22-23, 7 games, and a 1.84 save percentage. Pretty solid. 23-24, 6 games and a 4-2 record. 24-25, he played 1 game in NCAA play. 1 game, 2.92 goals against, and he lost, and he didn't win that game. The majority of the games for Clarkson last year went to a young man who, with the fantastic name of Ethan Lagenegger, who's currently playing for the Orlando Solar Bears in the ECHL. Now, if you turned around and gotten him instead, so what's Lagenegger played for Clarkson last year, 35 games, 2.14 goals against, 91.4 save percentage, 22-10-2 record. He has played 1 game for the Solar Bears this year, where he conceded 5 goals on 19 shots, and that appears to have been it so far for him. But if you had signed him off the back of his NCAA numbers, you'd have understood that. But like I say, this is the thing. I'm sure Brady Parker is a good goalie, because you think of Slavy Kulikov is not going to want to sign a complete traffic cone. Jamie McElroy will not allow such things either. But this is still a head scratcher for me, because for me all this ends up doing, when you had Alex Oldell, Dan Crowe, Curtis Warburton, when you've got a pipeline of young goalies behind them, you've kneecapped your starter. You've kneecapped a young British netminder starting in the National Division, and I don't understand why. And I'm sure, as ever, I can hear some of the noises. Oh, you have to let it play out. Oh, you don't know all the bits and pieces behind the scenes. Well, then, if we don't know, tell us. That's what I always say on that one. If I don't understand, make me understand. If the masses don't understand, make them understand. Don't sit there complaining that people are speculating when all you have to do is tell us why, and we'll stop. Right, we will. Let's have a quick look at the chat. Where does Dan Crowe end up for me in the National League? Crowe's a good backup. I don't think Crowe is number one as harsh as it sounds. He's got time to develop though, Jamie, and that's the argument you can make of all netminders. Doesn't mean they all do, but netminders develop later. I'm always reminded of the thing that the average age of a netminder to make his debut in the National Hockey League is 20 years old, and the average age of a starter in the NHL, starting netminder in the NHL, is 28. Goalies develop differently. Is the funds better invested into the club than paying 5 imports? How much damage is that doing? Well, I suppose the thing, of course, is that the Steel Dogs aren't independent, are they? So it's not like Hull paying 5 imports or MK paying 5 imports. Though we can all figure out that MK probably can afford that, but it's part of a wider thing. With the Steel Dogs, of course, being part of the Steelers family, it's a different situation, so it may not quite impact them in the same way, Mike. The league will be a 5 import league next season. I think it's becoming an inevitability. It does feel like it's rolling that way. I'm not sure some of the lower end clubs would be very happy on it, and I don't know whether this is one of those things that needs a unanimous vote to pass off the top of my head. Some things do. Some things are majority vote. Some things are a unanimous vote to allow. And I can't remember off the top of my head whether the import increase is or isn't. I think it is, but please don't quote me on that. Either way, let's have a look at some results from last weekend across British hockey. We're starting, as we do, up in the Elite League at the top level. And, of course, last Wednesday night when we were chatting, it was 3-3 because it was 3-1 and then it was 3-3 very, very quickly. And the Guildford Flames got themselves to overtime against the Sheffield Steelers. But that man again, Mitchell Balmas, who is, I should say, a terrifying player to watch live with my own 2 eyes. Of course, the other big news out of this game, Jake Kugler, thrown out for a misconduct during overtime. And let's face it, the penalty that was called that led to the power play the Steelers scored on was a horrible missed call by the officials. They called a penalty, was never a penalty in a million years. Cliff Poo loses an edge. He's not been hauled down. Shouldn't have been called. But whatever Jake Kugler has said, not only got him kicked out of the game, he got him a 3-game suspension into the bargain. He missed Sunday night's game for Guildford. He will miss this weekend as well. He will return for the following weekend. That was Wednesday night. A couple of games then on Friday. Belfast coming from 3-0 down after 40 minutes to beat the Manchester Storm by 6-3. Cardiff started their Scottish triple header with defeat in Glasgow against the Clan. Pressing buttons here on my end as well. There we go. Into Saturday then, a pretty busy Saturday, punctuated again by Cardiff losing the second game of their Scottish triple header, losing 5-4 to Dundee. Bad news for Coventry in this one, as Matt Robson didn't finish the game against Nottingham. Nottingham, 5-3 doesn't quite tell the story. Nottingham were pretty comfortable in this game, but for the most part. But as I say, the Blaze losing Robson to Sean Stewart coming in relief later on, but couldn't help turn the tide there. Manchester managed to pick up points and beat Belfast in overtime on Saturday night at the SSE. Quite a huge celebration. Some would argue maybe a little bit too much of a celebration. It was certainly getting mocked for it in some quarters. And then Sheffield winning 2-1 against Fife. Score there doesn't really tell the story of the stats on this one. Steelers getting tons more chances, dominant in the face-off circle across the ice here. 2-1, yes, but one really where the Steelers did a pretty professional job of holding the Flyers at bay. Into Sunday, Glasgow 4-0 up after 20 minutes in this one, and then just held Coventry at arm's length. The first Elite League goal for Austin Mitchell King. He made it 3-0 in the first period there. So congratulations to the former Peterborough man on that one. Cardiff finally got some points up in Scotland as they ended up giving Fife a bit of a kicking at Invercargill. A 5-point night, 1+4 for some chap that Cardiff picked up along the way called Brett Ferguson. Never heard of him. And then there was the game, of course, that I was commentating at on Flames TV. As you can see there, went all the way to the shootout. Guildford 2-0 up after 20 minutes. Sheffield pulling their way back, scoring twice in the second period and scoring very early in the third to make it 3-2. A late Josh Waller power play goal, sending it into overtime. Couldn't be decided in the extra 5 minutes, so it went all the way to the shootout. And Mitch Balmas, the man to break Guildford hearts again, should in this one the Steelers take the extra point. So we will have a proper look for the first time at the Elite League table, and there's a few bits to note straight away. Firstly, the Steelers are at the top, which will probably make them very, very happy. Nottingham with a game in hand, though, if they win, they would go above the Steelers. Looking a bit further down the table, of course, you can see Belfast have only played 9 league games so far, and Dundee have only played 7. They have 4 games in hand on Coventry and Guildford. Could be very, very tough times for those sides. Guildford and Coventry, particularly in league play, need to get things going. Guildford, of course, have had big amounts of injuries, as have Belfast. Kevin Moore's recent interview from a Coventry Blaze perspective post-game, especially the one after Glasgow, basically the most polite ringing out of his players you've ever heard. Fife there, as you can see at the bottom, 12 played, 1 point, 0, 11 and 1, and only 14 goals scored in those 12 league games. Will David Booth be able to change some of their fortunes? Quick look at the fixtures then. 2 games on Friday night. Coventry head across the water to the SSE to take on Belfast. Guildford have the long journey up to Glasgow. Will they be able to actually finish the game up in Glasgow? Because we know what happened last year there. Busy Saturday as well. Manchester welcome Cardiff. Fife and Glasgow meet outside of the Challenge Cup, as if these guys haven't played each other enough already. The big rivalry battle on Saturday night at the NIC between the Nottingham Panthers and the Sheffield Steelers, and Coventry look to get back to winning ways as they take on Dundee. Sunday, a few games on as well. Sheffield versus Manchester should be a good one, another sort of local-ish derby, albeit not the big one. Nottingham head up to the DIA to take on Dundee. Fife head down to Cardiff looking for revenge after a week ago. And then there is where you will find me, the late show as usual on Sunday, 6 p.m. face-off between the Guildford Flames and the Belfast Giants. A 2-1 win for the Flames the last time these two sides met at the Spectrum a couple of weeks ago. Guildford really needing a win. It's 3 wins in the last 10 for the Flames in all competitions. Belfast as well struggling with injuries. Guildford have been struggling with injuries. We know Jake Kugler suspended. For the Flames, who will be in net? Will we see Justin Fazio back between the pipes? Will Jake Kupski retain his place this weekend? Will Taz Berman get another look in? Who knows what's going to happen there? Either way, you can join us at about 5:55 on Flames TV this coming Sunday. Muggins here will walk you through that one. Into the National Division, as there was a decent amount of action over the weekend. Of course, last Friday, the Battle of the Southwest taking place down at the Pound, and the Swindon Wildcats battle their way through. Not an easy one, this one, and the Pitbulls have really shown an improved level of play, but Swindon coming out with a 3-1 victory there to keep themselves towards the top of the table. Peterborough's form seems to have fallen off a cliff a little bit recently. I know they've had a few injury issues too, but Leeds with a big win there against Ashley Tate's side, 6-2, the night's win against the Phantoms. And then goals everywhere. Not in Basingstoke, but a pretty crazy game. But Max Wright finally gets a shutout in British hockey. Zach Milton with the game-winning goal as the Bison continue their recent run of good form. MK, well, they seemed to struggle away from home, but didn't struggle at home. The return back to Milton Keynes of the Osborne twins after their departure for Essex, but Milton Keynes with the 5-2 victory there. And as is the law of hockey, your former player will come back to haunt you. John Dunbar with the overtime winning goal for the Bristol Pitbulls up in Dumfries. Again, afterwards, then we had Kevin Moore with the angry post-game interview. It was the Martin Grubb angry post-game interview after this one, but Bristol heading back down with the extra point there, and not a great one for Telford. Hull show up and they show out. The Seahawks blow away the Tigers by 5-1 on home ice. The return, of course, of Brock Bartholomew keeping the Seahawks fans happy there. into Sunday, a 0-point weekend for the Steel Dogs. Clearly, of course, like I say, things not quite the way we all expected them to be there. But Telford get themselves back on the horse after that tough home defeat the night before. They win by 2-1 in Upper Ice Sheffield. Ivan Björklund-Nordstrom with the goal for the Dogs. Harry Ferguson with both goals for the Tigers in that one. Solway, though, do get the response Martin Grubb looked for. One of their longest journeys of the season as they headed all the way down to Romford and got a 6-4 victory against the Raiders. 4-point weekend for the Seahawks as they beat the Knights in regulation in Hull. Matty Davies, of course, smiling ear to ear off the back of this one. And the Bison go 5 for 5. They, having lost 5-1 against the Phantoms in the opening game at the Basingstoke Arena, they were 3-1 down in Peterborough against the Phantoms before they come roaring all the way back. Jordan Spadafore, Luke Spadafora. I'll remember get their names the right way around eventually when I'm not thinking too hard. Luke Spadafora with the shootout winning goal, and the Bison, as I say, are 5 from 5, and they have knocked off some of the bigger names that people expected to do damage. They get some revenge for opening night in Basingstoke, and then one of those ones that people will have probably had circled on their calendars early to see how this one came out. These two sides usually have pretty impressive games against each other, but Swindon just keep on pressing on. They defeat MK by 4-2 and keep folk in Milton Keynes scratching their heads. There's the league table then for the National Division, and as we can see, still at the top and 5 points clear are the Swindon Wildcats. Leeds and Sheffield both on 25, though the Knights have played a game less than the Steel Dogs. Telford in 4th, MK in 5th, literally 500 hockey from Tim Wallace's side. Hull, Peterborough and Romford then at the moment make up the playoff spots. Romford are 3 points clear of Bristol, having played the same amount of games. Solway have a game in hand, which would only take them up to 15 points. Basingstoke, though, have now got 12 from 12 after this recent good run, and have now got themselves to 500 as well. 6 wins and 6 defeats for Jeff Flanagan's side. They have 5 games in hand on Solway, 6 games in hand on Bristol, Romford, Peterborough, and most of the teams above them. If they won all of their games in hand, of course that would be 12. That would be 12 points. Would shoot them quite some distance up the table. If you did that maths now, and Basingstoke won all of their games in hand, the Bison would be 4th. The cup table is a slightly different kettle of fish. We know pretty much the bottom end teams of this one are out, especially Basingstoke. But at the moment, if the semi-finals happen today, it'd be Milton Keynes, Sheffield, Swindon, and Hull, because Hull have got the tiebreaks in that one through more regulation wins. However, Sheffield and Swindon have only played 8 games. Leeds have also only played 8 games. They could find their way into the semi-finals as well. For Peterborough downwards, it's starting to look a little bit dicey on that front there. And then into the fixtures for this upcoming weekend in the National Division, of course. Max Van Mullen, the boy, had a bit of an interesting weekend, did Max, backing up Solway on Sunday, but having played for the Buccaneers, I think Max is just happy to get a win this season. But all eyes on Ice Sheffield on Friday night. The Steel Dogs and the Seahawks in Yorkshire Derby action at Ice Sheffield. Into Saturday then, and can the Bison keep that good run going? Can they make it 6 from 6 against the Telford Tigers? Bristol take on Peterborough. MK take on Solway. Of course, as I say, Johnny Yancis will make his debut for the Sharks. Sheffield take on Romford. Swindon versus Leeds, the Nell Classico, this Saturday at the Link Centre. And then on Sunday, hell of a weekend for the Knights away at Swindon. Home to MK on Sunday. Peterborough take on Bristol. Romford get their first a visit from the Basingstoke Bison. Solway head home to take on Hull, and then it's the battle of the cats. Telford, Swindon, Sunday in Shropshire. We'll quickly come out of there and have a quick check of the bits and pieces. Yes, Nicky, I've had a look at your message. I have a proper harder read of it, but I was aware of at least half of what was in there from what I skimmed through. Make it 5 imports, but goalie counts as 2. I've long advocated for the fact that I think counting import net minors as double is a good methodology. I'm not sure how legal it is, but I think it's a good idea. Should Coventry have more Saturday night games? The attendances are always better than the Sunday games. For the Blaze, Sunday night is traditionally the night at the Sky Dome, because they try, because with all the will in the world, Coventry is a football city, and you can't compete with Cov City. So they've always traditionally been a Sunday evening team. I don't think that's going to change. On that front, it's a bit like Whitley. Whitley literally changed leagues to have more Sunday home games on that one, James. So I don't know really what we do on that front. Given the amount of news, I'm still going to check Twitter very quickly and just make sure nothing else has happened. I don't think anything else has happened, as far as I'm aware. There we go. No other big news. Thank the Lord. You do wonder sometimes, like I say. Hey, if nothing else, big thanks to Fife and Sheffield for putting news out on a Wednesday night so we could chat about it. Just quickly chat about the Bison, as is, it's my show, so I'm going to do that. But for me, it's so terrifying to see the Bison on this ridiculously good run. Are they better than we all thought they were? But the thing is, as well, is yes, there is a lot of heavy reliance on this top line of Brendan Selland, Luke Spadafora, and Zach Milton now. Firstly, because if nothing else, Milton wasn't scoring and it seemed to be kicked into life now. Apologies, I just need to blow my nose very quickly. But yeah, so that top line. But also they're getting goals from other places as well. Tom Ralph has popped. I think Tom Ralph has got 5 goals already this year, which is pretty crazy. George Norcliffe's been chipping in. Adam Harney's been chipping in. And that's what you want. It's all well and good having that top line where a lot of your offense is going to come through. And like I say, Luke Spadafora has now really woken up and has really started contributing in a big way. Whereas he started very, very slowly, as you kind of expected when you don't have a home rink and don't train properly. But what is the ceiling for this Bison side? Because like I said, they've got 6 games in hand on a lot of the teams above them. And let's face it, the likelihood of them winning all of those games is small, given the fact they've got at least 2, 3 in 3 weekends. However, this Bison side looks good enough. The fact it is probably going to make the playoffs. And I think this causes a problem for Bristol. It causes a problem for Solway. It causes a problem for Romford, and it causes a problem for Peterborough if their form does not start to level out a little bit. But fascinating to watch. Max Wright, of course, has been an absolute unit for all the way through last season as well with the Bees, who we know the issues that the Bees had. Finally getting that first shutout, which he has so richly deserved through some of his efforts and saving so many shots. I kind of wish his volume was a little lower, but it's fine because he's doing okay. At what stage does Jeff Flanagan give Will Bray an opportunity, I think, is the question I'm asking in my head, because I would much rather Max take a few games off in November, December and January, so that when it comes to February, March and April, Max can get ridden get ridden like you want your starting net money to be done. Swindon versus Leeds, also key for the Cup. Swindon sends not only the Cats through, but also MK through. How are Swindon fans going to feel about that one? We help ourselves, but we also help out MK. What do? We don't know what to do. Which is a bit of a crazy one. Blimey. Yeah. Either way, I think, all things considered, I think Swindon are going to want to win. Swindon will want to keep pressing their advantage because, like I say, Swindon are in a really interesting position. I think it was Swindon as well put something out today that the Wildcats are top of their table on 30 points and Swindon Town are top of the table on 30 points, which was a weird little anomaly there. I can still only hear the stunt peg clip in my head. Swindon, not Windon, and that's the point. But at the moment, the Wildcats and Town seem to be doing the business. So maybe Swindon is Windon. We will wait and see what happens off the back of that one. Either way, so as we mentioned last week on the show, we usually, when we talk about Division 1 and Division 2 in the NIHL, we usually use the fantastic box scores from Joe Scutts of NIHL Stats. Now, Joe, not unreasonably, is off on his hollybobs. We saw that last week as well, where he put all of the bits and pieces for the next couple of weeks. And the fact that he talked about the fact there was not going to be any box score bits and pieces until later on in December, just due to bits and pieces. However, we have gone the Securious route and have done a few bits and pieces ourselves. So if I click this button here, and it should then pull up the bits and pieces. What we've done is we've pulled the scores. We don't have the box scores to go super in depth because Joe gets all the game sheets and I don't. But we do at least have the results for and the tables for the bits and pieces from across Division 1 and Division 2. So we're going to look at the NIHL and then we'll have a quick look at the SNL into the bargain. Starting in North 1, there is all the weekend's results there from North 1. A couple of big wins, as you can see, for Blackburn, scoring 18 goals across the weekend, beating Telford on the Saturday, beating Nottingham on the Sunday. Now, the game I watched on Saturday was Hull versus Billingham that went to overtime. And I'm sorry, Jets fans. I've looked at the video a bunch of times. The OT winner's offside. I'm really sorry. There's parallel tracks on this one because Billingham had 2 goals disallowed inside regulation and had that happen in overtime as well. But the parallel track here is I don't think Billingham played very well. They looked like they were overplaying stuff. They looked like they were overthinking stuff. Hull Jets are not a particularly revolutionary team in terms of how they play the game, but they work really hard. And Zach Brown did really well in goal. And ultimately, Billingham, when they needed to do simple stuff, yes, they got themselves to OT off the back of some really good power play work later on. But 5-on-5, they looked like they were trying to do too much. And sometimes you just need to do very little. Hockey is a simple game, as somebody told me on Saturday. And I know that Billingham fans may not want to hear that. However, yes, they can totally feel aggrieved by the fact they had two decent goals washed out. And then, like I said, for me, the overtime winner is offside. Sorry, Hull. But don't put yourself in a position where you can get beaten by an offside overtime winner, is the thing there. Elsewhere on Saturday, D-side put a cricket score on Sheffield. We'll have a look at the league table in a minute there because for all of us who've been keeping tabs on Kilmarnock, we can have a look on who's going to be the last team to win a game this season, and then the Barons, not the most comprehensive of victories, but still pretty solid. They beat the Lions by 5-2 on Saturday at Hobbsmoat Road, and then went all the way back up to Billingham, and the Barons win in Billingham again. Not quite the absolute demolition job they did earlier in the season, but a 7-4 victory away at the champions means that Billingham's title defence is looking very, very rocky before we even hit Advent. Hull with a 6-point weekend into the bargain as well. They beat Leeds by 6-3. Blackburn, as we said, they're 9 goals in 2 nights, giving Nottingham a bit of a kicking, and we know those two sides don't like each other. Telford do eventually get themselves on the board. They condemn the Scimitars to another defeat, getting back on the horse. Having lost to Blackburn on the Saturday evening, they then won 6-3 on the Sunday. Meaning that North 1 looks like this at the moment, and it is a clear picture at the top. The Barons, who have only dropped 2 points all season, 13-0-1, 40 points from 14 games, whereas Blackburn have slipped up and they have regulation losses on their record. The Barons yet to lose inside the 60 minutes. D-side, of course, are lurking there or thereabouts. You do feel like the fact that they've got a big game coming up this weekend, which will decide some of their cup future. But you can see down there in 6th place, Billingham, Billingham with a 7-5-1 record through 13 games. The fact they've lost 6 games, through this part of the season, almost unheard of. They didn't lose 6 games in the league in the last 2 seasons. Widnes and Nottingham making up the playoffs, although as you can see there, the Lions and the Knights too, probably going to battle things out there. And as we can see, the Scimitars at the bottom, 17 played, 17 lost, 38 goals, 116 conceded. Not the worst in British hockey, but not great either. This weekend in North 1, see some pretty big games, as you can see there. Leeds Knights versus Widnes on Saturday evening, going to be a big one in the playoff race, for example. Sheffield versus Blackburn at 12:40 is going to be a thing. Telford versus Hull will be an interesting one as well. And then on Sunday, like I say, some big ones there. Blackburn versus Billingham. You know, Billingham are going to want to make a statement down in Lancashire. Hull taking on Sheffield, as Sheffield look for anything at all. Nottingham versus Widnes as the late game could be a really, really interesting one. Should be being live streamed. Of course, you do have to pay for the live streams now. And then this bottom one, though, could be massive if the Dragons need a victory to help their progression in the Cup, or they should mathematically be out, is my opinion. But they are going up against a Solihull side that just seems to come at you in waves and has much more depth than it's ever had previously. Not quite as much action this past weekend though in South 1, a very, very light one, all things considered, but still goals galore because that's just the way things are. The game between Slough and Chelmsford on Saturday, for example, not quite literally. Hands thrown and goals all over the shop. As Slough put 11 on the Chieftains in that one. 11-3 the final score on the Hanger. Solent with their remembrance, their sort of late Remembrance Day game, as it were, putting Cardiff Fire to the sword by 7-1, and Streatham with a much closer game than they probably would have had in the last couple of years. But as we know, Swindon are starting to cause a few surprises. They've really stepped up their game. But either way, the Red Hawks win by 4-1 on Saturday night down in Wiltshire. And then on just the one game on Sunday, Chelmsford travelling across the country over to Cardiff with a comfortable 6-1 win for Lewis Clifford's side. The table at the moment still a bit all over the place because some teams haven't played that many games. Slough still have only played 6 compared to most teams having played 8 or 9. Streatham, top of the table, points clear of Chelmsford with games in hand. Remains to be seen with Slough. The fact Slough scored 53 goals in 6 games is pretty gnarly, all things considered. At the bottom, another team yet to win a game. The Buccaneers, 8 games played, 8 losses, and only 8 goals scored for 60 conceded, as we've seen as well. Obviously, the cup tables are there as well. We will talk about those as they start. We'll talk about the cups more as we head towards the semi-final bits and pieces. Not many games this weekend, though, either in South 1. It should be said, just 4 across the weekend. 3 on Saturday. The run for Buccaneers against Swindon Wildcats over at the Sapphire. Obviously, the Wildcats are much better this year, but it does feel like a game the Buccaneers could potentially target to get at home. Slough versus Solent should be an absolute corker at the Hanger. Streatham back on the high road against the Chelmsford Chieftains. So a couple of really good games on Saturday in South 1. Just the one game on Sunday, and it's a return fixture, having played at the Vindico last week. Chelmsford and Cardiff meet this week at the Riverside. Into North 2, and you can always rely on D-side for goals. And this time it was the Div 2 side, beating Altrincham on Saturday in a 16-goal thriller. 10-6 the final score for the Dragons 2 against an Altrincham side that's still looking to really try and make much of a mark on the league this year. Clash towards the top end of the table, but a win for Sutton against the Billingham Buccaneers. Billingham slightly had a bit of a wobble the last couple of weeks, but they still feel like they'll be there or thereabouts come playoff time. Either way, Sutton with another comprehensive victory. I'm just gonna very, very quickly double check because I'm aware one of the Glasbys, and I want to make sure it's the right one. Gets the just because one of them has now become the record point scorer for the Sting. So here it is. It was noted a couple of days ago from the Sutton Sting. We'd like to congratulate our very own ever-present number 17 Morgan Glasby, who after his 5-goal haul at the weekend has become the club's highest outright goal scorer of all time, overtaking Ryan Johnson. With age on his side and even further development to be had, we expect many more records to fall over the coming years. For me, the thing I would say is push on, see how you can do above North 2. However, it's entirely up to Morgan what he chooses to do on that one. I'd be fascinated to see both Morgan and Lawson play at a higher level. On to Sunday then, as we can see those 5 goals coming across the fact that Sutton scored 10 across the weekend, so put that into perspective. They beat Altrincham 6-1 over in Manchester. A shutout win for the Coventry Blaze at the Sky Dome, beating the Kingston Sharks by 4-0. And then D-side, in their second 10-6 game of the weekend, they won the first and lost the second. Our friends the Bradford Bulldogs finally getting themselves another win on the board in league and cup action. The team, though, top of the table, not in action this weekend. Sutton still have their destiny in their own hands when it comes to the title. Technically, they could go top if they win that game in hand, but there is a bit of a gap emerging. The Sting 4 points ahead of the Billingham Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers are 6 points ahead of the Coventry Blaze. At the moment, the team on the outside looking in is another team that has no victories. The Nottingham Lions at the bottom of the table. 9 games played, 9 defeats, 13 goals scored, 65 conceded. This coming weekend then in North 2, just the one fixture on the Saturday. Kingston and Sheffield will meet at the world's most versatile arena, and then a much busier Sunday in North 2. Billingham versus Nottingham is a chance for the Buccaneers to get back to winning ways. You wouldn't expect the Lions to win away from home in that one, but hope springs eternal for the Lions too as they look to get themselves away from the last team to win trophy. Bradford take on Kingston in that part of Yorkshire. Deeside at home to Sutton. Could be potential banana skin for the Sting this one against a Deeside team that likes to score a lot of goals. And also the other game, the team that is top of the table back in action, Sheffield versus Coventry, is a 4:50 face-off at Ice Sheffield. Into South 2 as we power our way through the results at the moment. And as we know, Rule 1, DBAD. Rule 2 at BOTW, don't count out the Invicta Mustangs as they go cross-country down to Cardiff and beat the Cardiff Canucks by a score of 7-5 for important points there. And then that second one there will always be a big one in the context of the league title when it comes to South 2, because the Guildford Phoenix, he says, quickly pulling up the wanting to pull up the stat here because they did post it themselves. But Guildford and Peterborough have been two of the sides that have always been knocking around the last couple of years when it comes to that North 2 title. And Guildford have generally picked Peterborough to the post the last couple of years. However, finally Peterborough managed to having beaten Guildford in the cup final last year, beat them in the league 5-2. The final score at Peterborough, and the Phoenix lose in regulation for the first time in 657 days. The last time they lost before that game was the 28th of January 2024. Is a bonkers statistic. Congratulations to the Phoenix on a great run. Having spoken to Josh Sherrington from the Phoenix, there's only one thing to do, and that's get back on the horse and get back to it. On Sunday, as we can see there, a few games on the Sunday. Bristol getting themselves a win on the board against the Solent Junior Devils in what was a bit of a tempestuous game. Who thought a 7:30 PM face-off on a Sunday was a good idea? Haringey, who've had a decent run of form, of course, beat the Phoenix in overtime recently as well. They win down at the Riverside against the Chelmsford Warriors by 6-4. The other 6-4 result on Sunday as well. Peterborough getting themselves a 6-point weekend, winning down in Gillingham against the Mustangs in a league and cup game. And then one game just in the Eddie Joseph Memorial Cup, a 6-5 win for the Slough Spitfires against the Oxford Rising Stars. So just looking at the league table in South 2, because things are shaking out. However, we do have teams where everybody has points. Even Lee Valley down at the bottom. Lee Valley have a win to their name, so that ship has already sailed in that one, and they're still within touching distance of Chelmsford and Oxford in that Division R. Lee Valley. At the top there, as you can see though, it is a perfect score from the Peterborough Phantoms. 11 games played, 11 wins, all inside regulation. The maximum 33 and 72 goals scored in 11 games. Guildford do have their destiny in their hands, but they need to win the return fixture as an absolute minimum against Peterborough when it comes down to it. They've got a 4-point gap then from the Invicta Mustangs, and it's Haringey, Cardiff, Slough, Bristol and MK should the playoffs start today. But Solent have played one game more than the Thunder and are on level points. This weekend then in South 2, just one game in the Eddie Joseph Memorial Cup. That is Saturday's game between Haringey and Slough. That's at 5:30 at Alexandra Palace. Apologies, my nose is still giving me a bit of trouble there. Cardiff take on Chelmsford on Saturday evenings. Guildford at home against the Oxford Rising Stars, with the Flames at home. Away on the Friday and home on the Sunday. Invicta take on Bristol. That's a 7 PM face-off on Saturday. Lee Valley take on MK. That could be a really interesting game, particularly if it comes to Lee Valley's chances of not finishing bottom. Solent's 5 PM face-off against Peterborough Phantoms 2. You'd expect that game to end one way. And then Slough versus Lee Valley is the only game to be played this coming Sunday. Should be a really interesting test for the Spitfires at home against the Lee Valley side, desperate to pick up any victories at all. Into the SNL, because we will come off we will talk about the results and then we'll come off screen to talk about it because it's obviously a little bit controversial. 2 games on Saturday, one in the league, which is that 2-1 win for the Warriors away at Kirkcaldy. Obviously a really tight, close game, big important victory for the Warriors as they look to try and track down the Edinburgh Capitals. And in the cup, Kilmarnock. Well, they scored 4 goals, which is pretty impressive. For them. They've struggled to get the puck in the net this season, but they do lose the first leg of their quarter-final in the Scottish Cup against the Aberdeen Lynx by 10 goals to 4. Dundee with an 8-2 victory over Paisley, of course, now bolstered by the signing of Barry McKenzie with his partner, due to have their second child before too long. Barry returning back to the Braehead Arena, not in purple this time, but in the colours of the Pirates. And Edinburgh continue their winning run with a 5-2 victory over Solway. I think I've seen Lee Valley versus Thunderous postponed, unsure of the reason. Oh, we'll have a look at that momentarily, Jamie. But then, as you can see there, Whitley versus North Ayr. So, for those of you unaware as to what happened between Whitley and North Ayr, Whitley were ahead at the 40-minute mark, and the word that came up from Whitley was that North Ayr had forfeited the game. Now, there were off-ice incidents at this game. Interactions between folk off the ice and players on it that should not have happened. He says, quickly darting to the Whitley Warriors Facebook page to just try and get the exact bits out of it. But obviously a bit of a strange one. They've put up highlights from the game as it happened. But yes, it was like I say. The announcement from the Warriors was, and this one came at about, I'm just trying to get the exact timing on that. We have been informed that North Ayrshire Wild have forfeited the game. Final score, Warriors 5, Wild 2. Now, Connor, who does SNL Ice Hockey updates on Facebook, in whose league table we'll show momentarily because he makes that graphic, he has not included that result in any of the bits and pieces, because ultimately we don't know what the state of play is. There's been no announcement as of yet from Scottish Ice Hockey as to what the situation is, as to whether this result is going to stand at 5-2 after 40 minutes, like it did in the Elite League in the Challenge Cup when the game between Manchester and Sheffield got called at 40 minutes because of the ice. We need to see what's happening here. There have been a bunch of stories flying around, like I say, talks of verbal abuse off the ice, fighting off the ice, and ultimately the game has not concluded in the way it should have done. So we will see what happens. It is obviously Wednesday evening. Now, those regular watchers will be aware. Certainly in the NIHL, a lot of business seems to happen on a Wednesday night, particularly because DOPS usually meets on a Wednesday night in the NIHL. It's never really been said out loud exactly what happens with Scottish Ice Hockey and how they deal with the SNL in those moments. We await for anything to be said. However, as it says, when I click this button and we look at the league table, this does not include any potential result from Whitley versus North Ayr. That is being held out until we have a full and confirmed thing as to what's happening. Either way, we still know that Edinburgh, perfect through 11. It's only 2 points. It's only 2 points for a win in the SNL. They don't do the 3-2-1 0 points tallying that the NIHL does. So Edinburgh now still keeping themselves in a healthy lead, 3 points ahead of Whitley with a game in hand. Of course, that would obviously be slightly different if when Whitley's result is added into this. Dundee, Paisley, Kirkcaldy, Aberdeen, Solway, and then North Ayr make up the playoffs. Kilmarnock's situation has not worsened, because as we talked about the fact that game this weekend for them is in the Scottish Cup against Aberdeen rather than being in the league. But either way, Edinburgh still managing to sort of trundle along and do some decent work. But Whitley look like they're going to keep them honest in terms of the table. Now, I don't have the upcoming fixtures. Firstly, because one of the things we've been doing is we've been pulling them from that little fixture ribbon at the top of the SNL site that didn't go all the way into Sunday. I wasn't going to do half of it. However, we will hopefully at some stage we'll try and get the SNL fixtures and talk about them and get them back on here. But I will say this again to the lovely folk at Scottish Ice Hockey: having that fixture grid on your website is all well and good. Please publish your fixtures on your website in an easier to read format so everybody can do it. It's so much easier when you do it that way. Just a list of all the games and the face-off times that are easy to read. I shouldn't have to look through a grid to try and make any sense of what's going on, is the short version there. We'll come out of this for a minute, just because I want to see. Let's have a quick look at the Lee Valley Lions and see whether that game is on or off. No, that's not what we want. We don't want the Lee Valley Lions fans. We want the Lee Valley Lions page. No, indeed you are correct, Jamie. Just looking at this. Home League Cup fixture against Oxford will now take place on Sunday the 30th of November at the 5:30 p.m. face-off. That's fine. Our Home League and Cup fixture against Milton Keynes, originally scheduled for Saturday the 22nd of November 2025, has been postponed. New date confirmed as soon as possible. The date for our home Eddie Joseph Memorial Cup game against Oxford remains TBC, to be confirmed as soon as possible. So that's obviously. So thank you for that, Jamie. Yes, we will. Obviously, that news had not reached Joe before he'd updated bits and pieces before he went on his holiday. Appears to be the answer on that one. Questions, comments, thoughts, feelings. Keep things chucking into the chat as we will do the last, but by no means the least bit when it comes to the fixtures here on the What's Current stream. Time to look at the WNIHL. I'm sure the Andrew Day Spidey sense is tingling. Huge game on Saturday when it comes to that bottom end, and obviously we talked about the fact that the relegation bits and pieces have changed now in the WNIHL, but either way, nobody wants to get the wooden spoon regardless. Bristol effectively cannot be relegated in their as they are the new team in, but they will have. But either way, it's still a huge game, and one that Streatham come out on top. They win by 4-3 against the Huskies last Saturday night. Not the best of Sundays for them though. They run the Queen Bees close, much closer than they have done in the past, but they end up still losing on the high road by 4-1 against the team that looks like they're making a real march for the title, especially given the fact that the Whitley Bay Beacons, who've been top, have their title hopes dented at home. It was an early face-off up at Hillheads, but the Guildford Lightning go all the way up north and come all the way home with the points into the bargain. And as we can see now, the standings don't make great reading for the folk from the northeast, as the Queen Bees' victory over Streatham now finally puts them at the top of the table with 2 games in hand over Whitley Bay. Both teams on 11 points, a 5-point gap then down to Solihull. Solihull with 3 games in hand on the Beacons, then followed by Guildford, Streatham, and Bristol. We can just see here as well that Andrew's putting some new bits in the chat in terms of that Whitley versus Guildford. Guildford game. Claire Turnbull, Amanda McWilliams, and Abby Colshaw with the goals there for Whitley Bay. Beth Hill, Isabella Zdienska, and 2 goals from Margot Sire, making it 4-3. Just as well, you're reading that from this as well from Andrew. Bristol goals coming from Ellen Perot Morey, Becky Inca, and Jess Jones, putting the Huskies 3-0 up, and then got 2 goals from Isabel Whiteley, and goals as well from Andrea Lamb and Rachel Hathorn. Pull Streatham all the way back to get them to get the Storm that result on the Saturday night. Plenty of games elsewhere as we look through the other divisions of the WNIHL. Just the one game in One North, and well, to say it was one-sided might be a little bit of an understatement. The Kingston Diamonds with a 17-0 victory at home against the Solway Sharks ladies. A couple of games in the south, and both of those games pretty one-sided into the bargain. As both winning teams both score 8. Swindon with a 8-0 shutout victory against the Chelmsford Cobras. The Fire Bees do let in a goal, but they still managed to beat the MK Falcons by 8-1. In Division 2 in the North, an 8-0 win for the Leeds Roses in the North Valerie Conference over the Sheffield Shadows at Sheffield. And in the Elizabeth Conference, a 9-0 victory for the Manchester Storm against the Nottingham Vipers 2. In the south, a much closer game, it should be said. Haringey edging their way past the Oxford Midnight Stars by a score of 4-3. And then in the Elizabeth Conference, the Invicta Dynamics getting a big win away at Bristol against the Huskies 2. 7-1 the final score there. And MK
Falcons 2 getting a victory over Cambridge Kodiaks 2. Final score at the Thunderdome, 8-4. No under-16 South games this weekend. 2 games in the under-16s Northern Division. A 13-1 win for the Manchester Storm over the Nottingham Vipers, and a big win for the Deeside Dragons. They beat the Billingham Stars by a score of 7-2. Andrew just updating some bits and pieces there in the chat in terms of stuff, in terms of some of the games and some of the bits and pieces. You can see there, Kirill Waddington for Chelmsford facing 68 shots into the bargain, which is pretty crazy. A hat-trick for Mila Peroni, hat-trick for Ellie Wallace, and goals from Leah Wallace and Miley Drazy with the Top Cats there, with that 8-0 walloping that they gave. Chelmsford. Like I said, Andrew's popping a few bits and pieces. I assume these are games that you went to, Andrew, but either way, lots of obviously you didn't go to all of these. That would be crazy, but certainly Andrew went to a couple of games as well. Also, remember as well, check out what Andrew and Alan Mackman are doing with the All Plays No Plays All Glory podcast that they're doing about women's hockey as well. Plenty of fun to be had there. Should be a pretty exciting weekend's worth of action wherever you get it, because I'm going to hit the button. Because we've done it. Every game from every senior division across British hockey, from the Elite League, from the Elite League through the National Division, through the 1 and 2, through the SNL and the WNHL. We have covered every game that happened in the last week in British hockey. We opened the door. Questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, anything you want to chat about as we edge towards the end of the show here. We got a good 10 minutes or so that we can chat about. Plenty of time still. So stick whatever you want to talk about in the chat. This is the free bit. We can talk about whatever you want. NHL, South African Super League, whatever you want to talk about. Let's have a chat about it now. Just shoot the breeze about hockey for a little bit. Andrew's very helpfully put the WNHL fixtures for this coming weekend. Solihull versus Whitley Bay on Saturday. Bristol versus Whitley Bay on the Sunday in the Elite League. Fibeys versus Top Cats at Slough on Saturday at over at the Hangar. Cambridge versus Chelmsford could be an interesting game at Chelmsford. 1 North this weekend. Solway versus Sheffield on Saturday. Nottingham versus Solway, and Widnes versus Kingston. Plus more in WNHL too. Yeah, there's a lot of games. There is a lot of games. Putting EEN. I don't know what that means, Andrew. So you might just need to. Anyone? I don't know what you're trying to say, Andrew. I think you're having a fat-fingered moment. I have those too, so don't worry, mate. Oi, oi, oi. But yeah, plenty of good stuff going on. It should be said. I'm just making sure I've not missed anything in the chat. There we go. No, we seem to be all right on that front. A few people messaging me going talking about David Booth, Simon for 5. But yes, Andrew, I'm not sure what you've just written a load of stuff in capital letters, mate. So have another go. Thoughts on the Ice Hockey UK merger statement? Until I see the concrete plan as to what they're wanting to do going forward, I don't really know what to say. Bar the fact that it is a little odd that, because I personally would really appreciate a statement from Clifton Wrottesley as to why he was so vocal against it 4 years ago and everything is fine now. I want to know what the change was myself, because I think given the fact he is now the chair of Ice Hockey UK, I think for transparency and clarity reasons, I think it would be really useful for him to say something. Ultimately unification is a good idea. I think the defragmenting the sport and making the structure make much more sense, I think, is a really, really important thing. I advocated for unification back in 2021. It failed because it didn't pass the vote at at the EGM for what was then the English Ice Hockey Association, and it passed a majority vote, but did not pass the 75% that was needed to make unification happen. Now, I had spoken to people in the past that had voted in favour. I spoke to chairs of a couple of different member clubs that voted in favour and why they voted in favour. And I publicly said, if you voted against this, I think I would really appreciate you coming out and saying why. And nobody ever did. I offered to have open and honest discussions with it. And I think I'm really interested now to see where those, and I'd say this again, if you voted no in 2021, are you voting no again now? And if so, why? And I know Henry Stalin said something about, talked about the fact that, it was a very different situation, and that there were, that it was, there was a lack of trust and a lack of sort of working together. But I'm not quite sure it's quite as cut and dried as he made it in one tweet, which is fair. Like, obviously, it's really, really hard to be completely perfectly articulate in 200, irrespective of whether you've got a blue tick or not on Twitter. But unification would have worked in a different way 4 years ago than it would do now. Now, this is not to denigrate the work that Henry Stalins and people have done, because what he has come in and done is played the game, right? They talk, if you're taking exams these days, yes, you've got to know the stuff, but you've also got to know how to take an exam. And this is kind of the journey that British hockey has kind of been on since Henry Stalins came in, is about playing the game, about ticking the boxes when it comes to sports governance things for UK sport, for making sure that X is done and that Y is done. My issue is that ultimately we're still at a position where it is really, really hard to actually evaluate what has been done, because all of the stuff is the sort of faffy behind the scenes bit where we're making other people happy but not necessarily doing stuff right here for this sport. The lack of word from the Elite League I find very interesting, because of course the Elite League sits outside of it, but it needs Ice Hockey UK to function, because Ice Hockey UK do all of the work permitty bits and pieces. Ice Hockey UK run the GB national team. The Elite League are, of course, heavily involved in such bits and pieces. So the lack of statement from the Elite League I find interesting. I think it would benefit them to speak out and to say something about that. Now, I'm not necessarily saying the Elite League needs to come under the purview and be run under IHUK by IHUK in whatever format, because we have seen more than enough times that the top leagues can kind of exist next to rather than under that umbrella. The NHL is not run by USA Hockey or by Hockey Canada. The DEL is not run by is not run by the Deutsche Eishockey Bund. Most of the top leagues in Europe operate as a partner to, rather than subservient to, the national governing body. That's just the nature of things now, and that so that is okay. But ultimately, the Elite League, I think, needs to kind of work out again where its place is and what its goal is when it comes to these kind of things. And I think I'd be very interested after the next owners meeting for the Elite League to properly come out and make a statement about this, because I think as well, obviously Ice Hockey UK and the Elite League have talked about the fact they've had dialogue about what happens in terms of the development of British players and working towards things like improving the national team. But we need to actually hear something, and this is kind of the thing where I feel about unification. It's needed because I think in the long term it will help things, but I'm interested to see what the actual plan is. What is going to happen on day one, by day 100, by day 1,000? Because ultimately, you've got, what have we got? Was it 11 senior leagues in British hockey? Is there a plan to merge the SNL into the NIHL structure and have one big overarching league with multiple conferences? What are we doing? What is the plan for greater encouragement of learn to play into under 10s to bring those players through to the national thing? What happens with rec? What happens in terms of interactions with ball hockey? What happens with para hockey? I want to see something more concrete, because the overarching theme is fine and is good, and I think it will benefit the sport, particularly as well where you think about the fact that other sports of our level of sort of interest and enthusiasm. The other big one that we talk about, because it's generally quite close, is basketball. And British basketball is in the mud right now. And if there's a real chance for British hockey to make hay while the sun shines, and that's not to say like I hope basketball disappears, because British basketball has as much right to be around as anybody else. But there is a real opportunity for British hockey to seize a lot of momentum where British basketball is struggling to kind of get those bits and pieces sorted. I genuinely hope British basketball does get things sorted, because basketball is a fantastic sport that encourages, like hockey, encourages teamwork and encourages a lot of really, really good traits for young people to have. But as well, from a developing and growing the sport, there is a real boom. There's a potential for a big boom period. But I want to know what the plan is. I don't need all the minutiae, but I kind of want to know more than we're going to do better. Great. It's like when my son has a bad day at school. What are you going to do tomorrow? And he just says, I'm going to behave well. And it's like, well, no, you need to tell me more about what you're going to do to behave well in those kind of things. And I think that's kind of where I am on it at the moment. Henry, if you're watching, give me a call. I'd love to have a chat and kind of figure out what the wider plan is, because I'm all well and good hearing about the grand vision. I'm past wanting the grand vision. I want granular detail now, please. That's what I'm after at this point. And that's because I'm a nerd for this kind of thing. I want to know what the actual plan is. I'm not interested. Because strategy is all well and good. You can talk strategy till you're blue in the face. I'm an operations guy. I want to talk about stuff, but I also want to see what's getting done. Anyone going to Murrayfield for the GB games? I personally am not, unless GB want to pay me to go up there and commentate. Otherwise, I'll be slightly stuck. But no, I'm not. I'll certainly be trying to watch. I think having a tournament at Murrayfield, I think, is really good. I think as well, it's a it's a classic hockey venue in this country. It's being able to fly into Edinburgh is a good thing to do, because let's face it. You have to fly into Manchester and then travel, whereas you can fly to Edinburgh and be in Edinburgh. I know Murrayfield's not the easiest place to get to in Edinburgh at times on public transport, but I'm interested to see how it goes. Cracking old school venue. Hockey exists outside of Nottingham and Sheffield, so I think it's really important to get GB into more places for more people. Like I've said, GB need to come down into the south. They need, they've played in Wales, which is great. They've done Nottingham, they've done Sheffield, they've done Milton Keynes, they've done Leeds. They need to come into the south, please. I think it's important that they come to Swindon, or they come to Basingstoke, or they go to Guildford, or they find somewhere that's not in the middle of the country, then they actually come down here as well. I'm not saying they should play at Gosport. Hilarious though it would be to watch Liam Kirk try to skate around Gosport, because he's such a good skater. He'd take 2 strides and be around the rink 4 times. But because obviously those fixtures have been announced today. We'll definitely be keeping tabs. Going to the Thursday games, because the Knights are at home on the Friday. Hey, fair play, man. I mean, because obviously you're based quite a way up north anyhow, so you've got the option. But should be a good tournament, another good test. I venture that this roster will be closer to what we're expecting. It will be closer to a World Championship roster than what we had in Poland, just because of the nature of getting that bit closer and trying to get more of a roster. What I do need to find is try and get those fixtures up so we can talk about them very quickly. So Thursday the 5th of February, Poland versus Slovenia, Britain versus Ukraine. Friday the 6th of February, Ukraine versus Poland, Britain versus Slovenia. And then Saturday the 7th of February, Slovenia versus Ukraine, Britain versus Poland, which is a smart thing to do given the amount of Polish people that we have in Britain compared to the amount of Slovenes and the amount of Ukrainians. Those afternoon games are all at 2 p.m. GB's games all face off at 6:30 p.m. The other thing we had as well that came out of the double IHF is the fixtures for the Continental Cup in Nottingham when it rolls around. It says, just quickly skimming back to them. So the 14th, 15th and 16th of January. So 14th of January, Nottingham will play Mogo from Latvia. Nottingham then have Nottingham have the day off on the 15th, and then on the 16th, I'm trying to remember who they're playing. Is Katowice, I believe that they're playing on that one, and then there's placement games and bronze medal games on the 17th. So the potential there is for the Panthers are going to play a lot of hockey in a really short space of time, but really looking forward to seeing how that goes. Should be a cracking weekend in Nottingham, of course. Belfast with the Friendship 4. Tons of good stuff going on. I agree, Anthony. I'm a hockey nerd. I want to hear the details. Cautious optimism. Yeah, and I think that's the thing as well. Cautious optimism, I think, is the byword for me as well. I want things to go well. I like to think over the time of doing Banners on the Wall that I've proven that I will more than happily let people. I want people to do well. I want British hockey to do well, but also as well, if you're the people leading it, I want to know what you're doing. Like, I don't. Sometimes I think British hockey is like, oh no, we'll tell you when the time is right. Nah, if you're doing something, tell us what's going on. It's much better doing it that way. Was impressed with the Bison on their visits to the castle. Yeah, the Bison look great at the Mo. A lot of confidence. Good to be back home. Good to be training again. A lot of good stuff in that roster. A lot of good work going in. Really impressed. Really happy. As a fan, albeit like I say, one who's having to kind of watch from a distance at the moment. But yeah, that's the nature of that. That's the nature of the beast for me this year. Going to try and pop back down before too long, and catch a game. So I'm gonna keep tabs on what's going on and try and poke my head round the door when I get the opportunities to do so. I'm heading towards my first weekend off where I've got no hockey at all because it's not this weekend, it's the weekend after. I am missing Guildford's game because of a prearranged thing before I took the gig, because I'm taking my son to see Gladiators on Sunday the 30th of November, which will be awesome. Goalies, yeah, Max Wright is great. Max Wright is ridiculous, Andrew. I think most teams would, like I say, my hope is that Will Bray's going to see some ice time as well before too long. Last call. Comments, questions, thoughts, feelings, anything else anybody wants to chuck in before we head out of here? Like I say, no other big news immediately leaping out that I can see. Nothing else I can immediately see. That's jumping out at everybody else. Of course, we had the thing about Brady Kay joining Spruce Grove Saints. They put something on their Instagram yesterday. They put something up there. They put something on their Twitter account today. I suppose the only other news that I've seen as well is that ice hockey players will wear neck guards in the Winter Olympics. So even the NHL players who are not forced to do so are going to be forced to do so for the Olympics, which I personally think is a really good idea because being protected is a good plan. I think we have covered all of the big stuff. In which case, we will call it there. Bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, your number one website for all bits and pieces British hockey related. Keep up tabs with me. Yes, we did, Andrew. That's back towards the beginning, so check back on that one. But yes, bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, your number one source for all things related to British hockey. Follow my journey through commentary as I break down and give you a unique look of bits and pieces from high above the Guildford spectrum from the commentary position in the box thinking across the season. The latest piece went out today from the 4-3 shootout loss to the Sheffield Steelers. Of course, we'll have another piece from Sunday's game against Belfast. That's going to come to you every week. Of course, as hockey stories as well, our long form in-depth looks at bits and pieces. We go from the 19th century to the present day, behind the Iron Curtain, into war and beyond. Plenty of stuff to check out. Of course, Jordan Kelsall, our latest piece is on there. New piece was the interview was recorded last night. It's going to get written up over the next couple of weeks. Coming too long. Really, really interesting story where I talked to two people whose paths are very, very, very firmly intertwined wherever they go, wherever they've been in British hockey. It should be said. It is a British hockey piece, this upcoming one. But like I say, plenty of stuff. Nearly 15 years worth of bits and pieces for you to check out over on the website bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. We are on X at BannersOTW. We're on Facebook.com/banners on the wall. We are on Blue Sky. All the bits and pieces there. You can go down into the description, hit the link tree. You've got the links to all of our social media bits and pieces, as well as the link to our virtual busking hat over at buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. Like I said, not going behind the paywall, but if you want to chuck a few quid into the pot to help the lights stay on and to keep the wheels spinning, massively appreciated. You can do so at buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. And of course, all of the usual YouTube bits and pieces. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. It's massively appreciated. And then, of course, like I say, back here Wednesday night, 8 p.m. to go through every single game of the last week across all of senior divisions of British hockey. The only place that does that live every week is here at Banners on the Wall, BOTW YouTube channel for the What's current stream. Well, another week done. It's starting to get colder out there. Winter is really firmly on its way, and we are firmly into hockey territory. Really, really feeling like I'm hitting a groove. I feel like as well, my commentary is getting into a really good place as well, and I feel like I heard somebody today, stop talking about what you deserve, or and talk about whether you deserve it and and talk about whether you want it. Well, I wanted something and I got it, so we're in a good spot, and it feels like people are enjoying it, and that's really, really cool. And you should take the opportunities that come your way when you get to do cool stuff too, because if you want it, go for it. And I think that 2 and a bit months into the season, I feel like I'm in a good. I feel like I've practiced what I've preached, and I think that's a really good thing. Be happy. And if you can't be happy, then wherever you are, please do whatever you can to please be safe. As my friend Scotty Watts would say, take care of yourself and somebody else. For bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, this is Anthony Russell saying stay safe. And so long until next time. Have a great weekend. Wherever you get your hockey, enjoy it where you find it. And we will all come back again next week. Next Wednesday night, 8 p.m. to talk through it all on the next What's Current stream. Take care, everyone.